The views, comments, stories, and opinions shared within this podcast are my own or those of my guests, and in no way represent the views of the company or companies that I or we work for. All stories, events, and tales shared within this episode may or may not have happened in the manner in which they are told. They may or may not have even happened at all. The details have been changed to protect the innocent and the guilty alike. This is Squawk Ident.
Minimum 200 above. 50, 40, 30, 20, 10. Retard.
Tower, American 1997. We just passed a guy in a jetpack.
American 1997, okay. Thanks. JetBlue 23, use costume. Person in a jetpack reported 300 yards south of the LA final at about 3,000 feet, 10-mile final.
Only in LA.
And Center Delta's 579.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we have an emergency with a disruptive passenger. We'd like to go back to San Juan and land.
Flight 260 for now, and maintain 8,000.
Okay, maintain 8, that's 260 on the heading, and we'll need law enforcement, obviously.
All right, Chad says we're definitely going to have to go inverted for that one, just so we don't mix blades. So we'll just do like a quick inverted barrel roll, get a quick high five down. How's that sound?
You're listening to Squawk Ident, an aviation podcast dedicated to the journey and the challenges surrounding the life and career of Aviator Tony, his co-hosts, and his guests. Together, we will explore the many pathways to an aviation profession, the realities of what a professional aviator can expect in today's marketplace, and we share many stories along the way. I'm your host, Aviator Tony, an airline pilot currently flying for a legacy airline with close to 20 years on the flight line. Today's show is recorded on the 6th of October, 2020, from the Aviator Sound Studios from somewhere in Southern California. On today's show, Rob and I sit down with a pilot of both air and sea. Joining me to kick off Flight 58 of Squawk Ident podcast is a former international and professional racquetball champion, a member of the 9G Club, an AMP and avionics tech, an RC aircraft commander, a pickleball master, a commercial drone operator, and currently a 737 pilot for Legacy Airlines, the name we use here on the show as an alias to our employer, a U.S. mainline carrier. From his fortress of isolation, where he has been witnessing construction crews ripping out his flooring and creating havoc throughout his entire space of tranquility. Serenity now, serenity now. From somewhere in Flower Mound, Texas, help me in welcoming back to the show, Rob D. Rob, how you doing?
What's going on, Tony? It's good to be back, man. And congratulations on the 1-year podiversary of
Yes.
Squawk Ident, man. That was a great show. I listened to it yesterday, and it's a milestone for you and the podcast. And I'm very happy to be a guest on your show or co-host or whatever you want to call me.
Co-host extraordinaire, my friend. This whole month I consider the podiversary. It's been a pretty good journey so far. It's really developed, and for any of those listeners out there that started out listening to the first couple of shows, I apologize. We were still learning on
Finding our way.
Yeah, sure. the way, the tone that we wanted to set for the podcast, and I think we've found a pretty good tone here. Also joining us today is a spectacular aviator. He's an avid fisherman, a Grady White boat skipper, a culinary angelou, a wicked YouTuber, voted the North Shore Boston Zamboni Driver of the Year 3 times in a row, a former EMB 145 driver for Sandpiper Regional, a Boston native, and currently a 737 driver for a major U.S. carrier we here on the show like to call Transglobal. Please help me in welcoming to the show, Mr. Tony Z. Hey, Tony, how you doing?
I'm well. How are you doing? Thanks for having me on. Happy to be here.
Oh, it's an honor. Thank you so much for joining us. So here on Squawk Ident, we focus on the journey of today's aviator, the challenges that they came across getting to where they are in aviation and beyond. And we like to focus on that and a couple good stories along the way. So I want to thank you for being here today and sharing your journey with us. So let's start out. How did you get your start in aviation? What was that trigger?
As a young kid, I always liked airplanes. I was always fascinated by it. And I can remember taking family trips to Florida. And, as a kid, you think like, oh, cool, Florida, which is great. Don't get me wrong. You're excited about going on the trip, but I'm excited like, oh, cool, get to go on an airplane. This is going to be a lot of fun. And, just sort of sparked my interest from there to the point where as a young kid, I just, anything that had to do with an airplane or an airline always had my attention. So I knew from a young age, this is what I wanted to pursue a career in. And out of high school, I started down that path. And some number of years later, here I am flying for Transglobal and sitting in as a guest spot on Squawk Ident. Who would have thought?
There you go, man. Well, we're really excited to have you. Now, you and Rob actually have a little bit of history together.
Yeah, we do.
What can you tell me about that?
So I used to fly with Rob at Sandpiper way back in the day, which was a Thursday, by the way, if I remember right. And we flew probably I'd say at least half a dozen times at Sandpiper. We're both based out of New York. So yeah, we had a couple of fun trips together over there.
Yeah,
I remember when I met you, Z. You were just awesome. As soon as like first impression, I was like, this guy's sharp. He's going to be an awesome guy to fly with, and I was right. My intuition was right. I mean, we had such a first good trip, and I look forward to all the other times we flew. And every time we did, we always had a good trip and good times, and shared some stories.
Likewise, very similar impression and feeling as well.
Yeah. And so you guys flew together. Did you sit in the cockpit and do what we normally do and go, so what'd you do before this? And, what have you been flying?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. We went through the standard progression, I think, as everybody does.
Yeah, that's how this podcast got started. A buddy of mine who is not an aviator sat down with me, a friend from the Breaker podcast, and now he's got a couple other podcasts going on and a YouTube channel, and so he's all over the place on the socials. But he sat down with me one day and said, "Hey, man, I got to get home and work on my podcast." And I was like, "What? Like Joe Rogan podcast? He's like that kind of thing?" And he's like, "Yeah, man, you should totally start one." And here we are a year later, and still going strong, But let's get back to it. Z, you started out at a relatively young age, and right out of high school, you were telling us that you decided, hey, man, this is something I've always wanted to do. I'm going to pursue this. And you ended up achieving a bachelor's degree in aviation sciences from Bridgewater State in 2007. What was that study like? I mean, was it a challenge for you, or was it just like any other college courses and aviation training simultaneously? What was that like?
I would say it was similar to any other college course, but the difference was I was actually interested in it. It was one of those things where, I mean, to be honest about it, a lot of your college courses, you just kind of, at least me, I just kind of just like, all right, hey, this is kind of like a check the box. You got to get this thing to get your 120 credit hours and get your bachelor's. But if it had to do with the core of what I was there studying, I was always a lot more interested in it. And I think because of that interest level, that corresponded to, you're more inspired to study and pay attention to and learn it more in depthly. So I enjoyed it quite a bit. So, I mean, to me, it wasn't one of those things when I say it was similar to another course. And I don't know, maybe I should walk that back a little bit. I enjoyed it. I mean, it was challenging. Yes, it was challenging, but the challenge wasn't a burden, is I guess what I was trying to correlate. That was the thought that I was trying to get at. And it wasn't a burden because I was interested in studying it. So I think when you're interested in studying something, I think that you're going to do what it takes. You're going to put forth a lot more effort and intensity for it. So I enjoyed it. It was challenging, but it was also a lot of fun to learn because you want to learn it.
Yeah. Yeah. And Rob, did you kind of have the similar aspiration to stay in the books? Do you remember back then?
Yeah, absolutely. For me, I took a different course out of high school. I didn't go to college. I went to the trades and eventually enlisted in the military. But very similar. I mean, exactly what Z said. For me, if I wasn't interested in it, I was not going to do very well at the studies or anything like that. So as soon as I found something that held my attention and curiosity, I was willing to put forth the effort and really learn about it. And for me, it started off with mechanic stuff, and then it transitioned into aviation and flying and piloting airplanes. So, I really dove into that, and I still do today because I love it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I every time I get a chance to learn something about the plane or whatever I'm doing, like for me presently it's my boat, trying to fix it, keep it top, seaworthy. I'm learning as much as I can about it and doing the best I can to keep it going.
Yeah, I think that's my next venture, is to figure out a way to pick up a boat. I need to join the club, man.
Well, you got to get that trailer going, man.
Yeah, BOT, bust out another 1,000, right, Rob?
That's it, brother.
Let me tell you something. From experience, I can tell you personally, there are 2 great days of boat ownership: the day you buy it and the day you sell it. Everything in between can be somewhere between ecstasy and a regret. Let's just say that.
Yeah. Well, maybe I'll just stick to renting when I need it, right? That's
it. It's cheaper.
I'll tell you one even better. Just know someone with the boat. Make nice with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
Bring a bottle of scotch with you. Whatever.
Oh, that's easy and cheaper.
Cheaper. Far more cost effective.
So you went through your aviation sciences program and you were working on your ratings simultaneously. And at what point did you decide to enlist in the National Guard?
So I was already in. I went in basically right out of high school and was doing it concurrently with being in college. I spent a few years in the Army Guard and a few years in the Air Guard just before I got out.
Mm-hmm. Any particular examples you can share with us with what being in the Guard entails?
National Guard, you're 1 week in a month, 2 weeks in the summer, although there was a lot going on at that time. And I did get activated for a year. So that sort of slowed down my progression. I always jokingly say, I was on like the 6 or 7 year plan with college. But when I was activated stateside. So I never went overseas. And I just, believe in full transparency about that. So I was activated for a year when I was with the Army Guard. And, I can just basically tell you that, depending on, the world geopolitical climate, what's going on, it may very well be more than 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks in the summer. I tried to pursue a pilot slot, but the timing of it didn't work out. And, in looking into a pilot slot and also being in the Air Guard and being attached to a unit that had a flying mission, as a pilot, if you go into the Air Guard, it's a little bit more involved than just your 1 weekend a month, sort of 2 weeks in the summer, because you have your drill weekends as a pilot. But then at the same time, too, you have to maintain currency. You may have to get so many GPS approaches or cross countries or simulator qualifications, whatever the case might happen to be. So you're going to be in there more than just your 1 weekend a month. And that's something that, I think one would have to be aware of. And you shouldn't look at that as something that's a burden or something that's going to scare you away from it. But if you're looking to do it more on the side of being an aviator, just something to consider.
Yeah.
So I might have missed this, but so you were Army National Guard and Air National Guard at one point or another. What was your MOS in the Army? I guess that's the inside term of what was your job in the Army.
So I was 11B, which is infantry. And then when I transitioned or crossed into the blue, as I like to say, I went into airfield management.
Oh, nice. Airfield management. That's cool. And I asked that too, because for some of our military folks, especially the enlisted guys, I know there's a handful that listen to our podcast. They're interested in the aviation side, how to become a pilot. And not a lot of guys realize that you can transition, even from the enlisted ranks, not only into the flying ranks, of the military, but also civilian, kind of like we did. This is a good podcast for them to kind of, showcase, hey, it can be done. So I've done it. You've done it. Many of us have. You just have to. Did you have a GI Bill? Did you use that GI Bill for anything?
Some of it, yep, I did. I wasn't able to really use it for flight training, but just for for college expenses, absolutely. Sure. And sort of speaking to that last point, I think that what a lot of people might not understand about trying to get a flying billet in the Air National Guard or in the Air Force Reserve, it's not as simple as it is in the enlisted side, where you just go down to your local recruiting office and say, hey, I want to be in the Air Guard or the Air Force Reserve. So first thing first is you have to be an officer. And you have to be basically eligible to become an officer, which requires that you have a 4-year degree. So that's one part of it. And there, with the Air Guard and with the Air Force Reserve, you actually have to be hired by that unit to be a pilot. So what they do is they usually have 1, sometimes 2 boards per year where they'll allow you to submit a resume. The board reviews it. They decide whether they want to bring you in for an interview, and then say that they bring in 10 people. They're going to usually pick, and it's based on however many slots. They may only have one slot, they may have two. They'll say, okay, we're going to pick 2 primary slots and we're going to pick 2 alternates, or some variation thereof. So the big thing is that, you have to get out there, you have to apply to a lot of different units because it's highly competitive. I mean, it's competitive enough just to get selected. I mean, I remember when I was applying at certain units, and just with me, the timing of it didn't work out. I aged out before, and that's the other thing too. The last I knew, I think it was you had to be in UPT by your 30th birthday. So, that was probably going back at least 7 or 8 years ago now. So, check to make sure that's still the right number. But I aged out before I was able to get selected. But there were some units that I was applying to that they were getting like 100, 120 applications and narrowing it down to 10 people they want to interview. That's tough enough. And then out of the 10 they're going to interview, they're taking 1, maybe 2. So it gets pretty competitive. It does. But don't let it discourage you. But that's just the competitive nature of how it works. And if you're really serious about it and you're just, willing to push hard and do what it takes, it's definitely accomplishable. But you have to know what you're up against to look into something like that.
Yeah. And it's interesting. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say your story mirrored my experience. I mean, that's exactly what I was up against with my guard unit, just hundreds and hundreds of applicants and, people that were way more qualified than I was. And, we're fighting for 2 spots, so I was like, if I get it, cool. I just hit the lottery. If not, I kind of expected it, but, you have to apply to try. So, if you don't apply, then you're not going to win.
One of the things I think that might discourage people is that, they may look into this and find out, whoa, some of these applicants I'm competing against are like Ivy League graduates with a 4.0 GPA and an All-American in football. And, they've got 1,000 hours of flight time already. I can't compete against that. Believe it or not, that's not always who a lot of these units take. They're looking for not the best person. They're looking for the right person for that squadron. And that doesn't mean that the person with the 4.0 grade average that's an All-American is not the right person. But a lot of times what these units are really looking for is just looking for, hey, are you a good fit for the unit? And there might be, out of the 10 people that they select, all 10 of them might be really great guys or girls that they might think, hey, they're all a great fit for the squadron. Now it's a matter of, okay, who are we going to invest money on to go to UPT? Because financially that unit has a big amount of money that they have to invest into you because they have to allocate that money for you to go to UPT. So they want to make sure, number one, that you can get through the training. But the biggest thing is they want to make sure if they're deployed with you, that they can be with you for, a period of 90 days or 6 months, without wanting to shoot you as opposed to the enemy. So, don't let it discourage you that, you might be stacked up against, on paper, some really stiff competition out there, but just if you're serious about it and you just have the confidence to pursue it, maybe it doesn't work out for you initially, but just keep pressing at it. And I really think that, personally, I think that the Air Guard and the Air Force Reserve is is one of the best kept secrets out there. It's like one of the last great deals that's still around. And if you can get into that and get your hours and get your training that way so that you're not out of pocket for it. And maybe you can even avoid, possibly having to go through the progression of a regional airline. Like, look what's happening right now. Here's a great benefit. There's a lot of people that are facing furlough. And this happened with a lot of pilots post 9/11. And, that when I was in the Air, I was like right around 04 to like 07-ish. 9/11 had been some number of years earlier than that. It was in 2001. There were still a lot of pilots that were furloughed from the different legacy carriers that were flying full time in the Guard. So that's a great thing to kind of look at too. That's why I say, the Air Force Reserve, Air National Guard, it's a great deal. It's the last good deal that's still left out there. It's the best kept secret in the world as far as I'm concerned. So if you can get your hours and do it that way, pursue it, and don't let the competitive nature of applying for one of those spots scare you from applying. And I think that psychs a lot of people out. They think I can't compete with this competition, and they don't even try.
Yeah, that's good advice.
And you said a couple things that were very interesting. The first thing that I just wanted to focus on a little bit was don't let it discourage you. And it reminds me, years ago in my previous life, in the previous job profession that I had, we had an individual that was trying to become a supervisor and move up in the company. It's obviously a big pay jump, and, it was more of a management role. And it was very competitive. We had 7 people vying for that spot. And, after extensive interviews with all the managers of the building, and, everybody had like a review and a selection board, basically, at this retail job, at the big box retailer. And we ended up going with 2 people. And this individual, who was one of my what I used to call gold stars. I always had, as a manager, I always had 4 or 5 employees that were my gold stars, that I knew that, if I needed to get something done, I knew that they're the ones that I'm going to try to give the work to, because their aspirations were to move up in the company, and I knew it would get done. And he was one of my gold stars. And he came to me afterwards and was extremely upset. He goes, this is bull crap. And he was mad. He was mad because he said, I'm more qualified. I've got more experience. And he also was an active reservist. And he goes, I have more experience. I deal with generals and stuff. And I can't believe the way I've been passed up by these people who are not even, as experienced or as old as I am. And I said, well, if all it took was for you to hear one thank you, but no thank you, to discourage you to the point where you no longer have faith in your job, your position, or this company, or the people that run it, then it tells me that the management and their decision was a good decision, because if this is all it took for you to get discouraged, well, then this is not really the job for you then. And it was a little, come to Jesus moment for him, pardon the expression. Yeah. And he did turn it around, and he did become a member of management and moved on with the company. And, I wished him the very best to do that. And we did everything we could, but that's what he had to hear. And the fact that here we are more than 20 years later, and you're saying the exact same thing, that you can't let little things discourage you, whether that's with military service, whether that's in the commercial realm of trying to get a job at an airline or trying to move up or whatnot. And I know this is at least at an airline level in aviation, it is a seniority based promotional place. But just staying in your rank and file and being a pilot and moving up and becoming a captain and earning your 4 stripes, that's not the only position you can get out there. There's plenty of management job positions and plenty of positions in leadership where it doesn't matter what your serial number is or your seniority. All that matters is that, do you have the right attitude, which lends to the second part of what you mentioned, that I really have been saying this from the beginning of the podcast. It's all about the attitude. Who gets hired? Yeah. It's not the person that has the most experience, the most type ratings, the most flight time. It's the person with the right attitude. So, like you said, am I going to want to shoot you more than I shoot the enemy? Or am I going to be okay flying a 4-day trip with you? Or are you just going to make me and the entire crew miserable? So having the right attitude, having the right perspective in this aviation career is actually the key to everything, to getting hired, to getting those promotions, to networking yourself, to having the opportunity to move on and move forward in aviation. So thank you for kind of reminding us all about that. And it just goes to show of the excellent attitude that you've had in the beginning of your career that got you into the position where you are. Now, you were telling us that as you were coming up through your flight instruction, you made it to CFI flight instructor position. Did you have a lot of students when you were?
I got the CFI, but I really used it very little. I think I used it like 20 hours or something like that, maybe not even.
So you got hired on real quick. It was pre-FAR 117 requirements of the 1,500 hours. You were able to land a job at a regional airline. How did that process work?
Right. So what was going on? 2007, the regional airlines needed pilots, and it was before, the 1,500 hour rule came into effect. It was well before that. So there were bridge programs out there where basically they would take you from pretty much having your multi and your commercial to what you go through. And I went through it down in Vero Beach at Flight Safety, is they basically take you through what is a full on type rating, except you don't actually get typed, but it's pretty much the same exact training. And actually at the time I was pre-hired by Sandpiper, go through this and pass and you have a job at Sandpiper. And that's basically how it worked. But, now the 1,500 hour rule precludes those types of programs from being out there. So I did get hired on with pretty low time. Like I said, I forget the exact number. It was under 500 hours,
So you were in a part of the bridge program. Tell me a little bit about this bridge program. What is a bridge program for those listeners out there that may not have heard that term?
Well, first and foremost, the bridge programs don't really exist anymore because you now have the 1,500-hour rule, and there's a couple of other stipulations in there too. I mean, you have to have 1,500 hours. You have to have a degree from an accredited aviation program. They might be able to water some of that 1,500 down to a lower amount of hours, but this was before any of those rules existed. So, kind of what I'm talking about, this was sort of what existed in the day, and that's a long time ago now. But anyway, it's as I kind of just described it. It's one of these things where you have your multi-year commercial, which qualifies you for it. And then you could go from basically that to going through one of these programs. And again, I did mine down at Flight Safety in Vero Beach, being pre-hired by Sandpiper on the contingency that, hey, you go through this program, you pay for it out of pocket, you have to pass this program. And when you do, we will give you a class date at Sandpiper. So that's what I went through. And the program that they put you through is basically what equates to going through a full-on type rating, except you're not officially going to get a type rating out of it. It's the same training, but you don't get the type at the end of it. And it's pretty much the same, long-term training footprint that you're going to go through when you get hired at Sandpiper or whatever respective regional at the time. So that's kind of how that works.
Neat.
Or how it did work, past tense.
Hey, so was that bridge program associated with Bridgewater State program?
No, it wasn't. No, I mean, Bridge program and Bridgewater State. I mean, I could see where one would make the correlation, but
because I attended the Delta Connection Academy for a short period of time, and I think I remember Bridgewater as being one of the schools that had the bridge program for that. But like you said and alluded to, everything morphed into something different, and
right.
Yeah. So you went through Flight Safety's program and ended up in 2007 landing a job at Sandpiper. Do you remember that interview process back then? How difficult was that?
I'll tell you what, you going into the interview, you're very nervous about it. And I still remember the lady who interviewed me. I mean, basically, I think everybody at Sandpiper remembers Claudette and just what a nice lady. I mean, you get in there and, it's like you're in the big game, so you're right at kickoff, you're nervous, you don't want to make a mistake. And I remember walking into the office being like, oh, okay, what am I in for here? It's going to be, it's just going to be a really intense, grueling interview. Just made some small talk. And then 10 minutes later, after sort of transitioning from the small talk, I realized, oh, the interview already started and I didn't know it. And the lady was just great to talk to. She's just a very pleasant person. They ask you kind of the standard interview-ish type questions, which you prepare for those. And I'll say it was a very pleasant experience. Claudette was a great lady to work with. And on the subject of interviews, and I know that Claudette was doing this up until recently, or I think she might still be doing it as a matter of fact, but she does interview prep along with Judy Tarver, another one who does it. And I actually did Judy Tarver's interview prep some number of years later when I was trying to get on at some guard units and then again at some different airlines down the road. And that's one of the things that, going into an interview, I would highly recommend is do an interview prep. And there's I'm trying to think, there's FAPA. There's a couple other ones, I think Emerald Coast, Cage Consulting. I assume most of them are still around, but granted, interviews right now with what's going on, there's not too many of them to be had, but this too will pass and it's going to spin back up again. And I definitely would recommend that anyone who's going to interview coming up, hire one of these people. It's a great investment. Like I said, I worked with Judy Tarver. She was excellent. I highly recommend her. And oddly enough, the lady who did my interview at Sandpiper was also, an interview sort of consultant for people down the road, Claudette Carroll. Yeah, they're all very good. I definitely would recommend looking them up and checking them out.
Yeah, and you got hired on at a regional airline with less than 500 hours. This is, now we look at this like, whoa, really? But back then, that was actually very common.
Normal.
In that time frame.
And it's sort of history repeating itself because I can remember before I was at Bridgewater State, I was at North Shore Community College for 2 years, and they had an aviation program where we did a lot of our flying up at the Beverly Airport. And the person who was running that program, at the time was telling us stories to the likes of in the 1960s, airlines that a lot of people probably don't remember right now. But he said, legit legacy carriers like Eastern Airlines would go to the local flight school up there at Beverly and just be trying to recruit people right out of the flight school. Hi, what are you working on? Are you working on your multi-year commercial? Here's my business card. When you get this, call me. I want to interview you for Eastern Airlines. You had people back then going into the right seat of a DC-9, flying for a major carrier. So in a way that was sort of, cool. History repeating itself to some degree at that time.
Wow.
That's the cyclical nature of the industry, right? That is
Sure
what
is.
we have been preaching here, that like you said, this too shall pass. And that is just the nature of the beast. So
yeah, and don't get discouraged. I mean, things are very, parabolic. So, we were way up here, we're kind of down here, but the parabola will come back up again. So, people just hang in there and not get discouraged. This too will pass, it's just, history's proven it. People said after 9/11, the airlines are dead. They're never coming back. Nobody's ever getting on an airplane. It didn't quite work out that way.
Right. And look at us now. I mean, people are mimicking those same echoes of, oh, no, the industry will never return the way it was. It's going to take a decade. And I don't think so. I just don't think so.
The industry will change. I mean, the mergers. I mean, look at, 2001. That was just before American merged with TWA. So realistically, you had 7 legacy carriers at the time. But just as 9/11 happened, I guess technically you can make a case it was only 6. And then coming out of it, almost 10 years later, we were down to 3. So will the landscape of the industry change? Absolutely. I think that we will probably, following this, we'll probably see some sort of mergers or consolidations or something like that. The industry will stay sustained. The landscape will change.
Yeah. And we've been talking about this for a while. I know Rob and I have had conversations for years now about the regional industry and will this hub and spoke feed model continue on? And we've been saying it for a long time. It can't. And it can't, not because of this. We didn't predict the industry changing because of a virus, but we did predict the industry changing because of a lack of qualified applicants at the regional level, because as these mainline carriers and legacy carriers were going to hire like gangbusters, which they were up until, January, February of this year. And what we saw was the model couldn't sustain itself because there just wasn't going to be enough pilots to fly those regional feeds for the mainline carriers under contract. So something was going to have to change. And this kind of sparked a huge change. We've already seen 3 U.S. regional airlines completely shut their doors. That number might be
Transstates and
ExpressJet now is out. Yeah. So so what's next? We don't know. But as we develop a solution to our current issue, our global issue, this may soon merge into maybe not mergers at the legacy level, but definitely at the commuter level. We're going to start to see some major changes.
I think you're going to see some very big changes at the commuter level, and respectfully, I do think even at the major level, I think we will see some sort of consolidation or mergers.
Sure.
But the thing is this: I think when you look at the regional airline business model, they're regional airlines really are contractors of sorts, and when you have so many of these contractors, that when you really look at where the sources of their flying come from, it comes from basically the 3 legacy carriers. I think Alaska does have some regional feed as well. So, the sources are pretty limited. So the competition amongst these regional carriers where they are contractors and they're having to basically submit very competitive bids, they've pretty much got to perform their services, for a lower and lower price, every time, comparatively speaking. So I think that really what has to change here moving forward is the concept of the regional airline business model, because that trickles down to where you talk about qualified pilots, where you invest so much into becoming a pilot. You're out of pocket for your 4-year degree. You're out of pocket for all of your flight training. You're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt that you're going to assume. And then what are you going to do? You're going to walk into a job that pays you, $45,000 a year. And I know some people say, well, they pay you more now. But if you look at the fine print, a lot of that's bonuses. So you're taxed very heavily on the bonus.
Yeah.
And the bonus can go away. There's a lot of little gut-yous in there that you have to watch out for. And even still, even if you're at a point where you're making $60,000 a year, you're expected to live in base, or you're encouraged to live in base, where the cost of living is insanely high, and that's still not going to cut it, just on principle, let alone with the amount of debt that you have to service between student loan debt for your degree and your flight training and all that. So I think a lot of that stems back up to the business model of regional airlines, which I think that has to be revisited and rethought.
Do you think it'll go back to where mainline carriers own or wholly own all their regional feed so that they can keep it in-house? Because I know they went away from that in the 90s and in the early 2000s, because they figured, okay, if we contract out this flying, now we're not responsible for insurance costs, for in medical issues, retirement funds, and so all of these kind of issues of operating costs go out the window, because now we're having people compete for a contract, and we're going to always go with the lowest bidder. And so that's the model that became the regional airline industry. And for legacy airlines, that's the model that we saw after, like really literally the day after the bankruptcy was declared. Then the scope clause that protected the mainline from only using what 96% of all flying had to be from a wholly owned. Well, the minute you declare bankruptcy, the scope clause is out, and we saw 5 regional airlines come in and pick up that feed when we were at Sandpiper. And so it got very competitive, and then we ended up going from being a relatively streamlined operation to being the most expensive operation for regional feed for legacy airlines that the company had. And I remember that was a huge turning point somewhere around 2012, where they're like, all right, if you guys don't cut your costs down to like what the other guys are doing, then we just can't continue to operate. And that's when we saw this huge shrinking of at least at Sandpiper, where we went from 3,100 pilots after bankruptcy and merger with the main lines. Then we saw our pilot group go down to, 1,400 at its low point. So
something like that.
Over half. And so that model was the prevalent model. And that didn't just work for pilots. We saw that with ramp operations. We saw that with maintenance. It's continuing to go on with maintenance because, if you have an in-house maintenance, you have to give them benefits and travel privileges and medical and 401k options and all that stuff. Yeah. But if you contract it out to the lowest bidder, and now you can have groups of people coming in from even other countries to go work for a company that is now contracting the maintenance out for the main line. And now the company is going to go, hey, well, those guys are doing it cheaper unless you can lower your costs. Yeah. The new contract.
I think that's the way it's going to go. I think contracting, I don't know, this is just my totally uneducated, shoot off the hip kind of or response to that. I think the regional flying is gonna. I don't think there's gonna be more carriers, but I think it's gonna increase, and only because of cost. I think right now the companies are all thinking of ways to save money, and if they can do a lot of things outside of the outside of its own house and contract lower cost carriers to do it, they will. Within the scope of, all the business and unions and all that stuff. And whenever it comes to a point where, hey, we don't need you anymore, or, we need to save more money in these areas, they can always do that with the with the contracted carriers. And, I think with the 3 regional carriers, ceasing operations, leaves less carriers out there to do business with. But I think those carriers, as long as they're strong enough to survive this and can operate within, the costs of the operation, they will be able to, if they survive this, I think they're going to take on a lot of pilots eventually, because people are going to want to, people are going to want to fly again, and they're going to start flying out of these smaller cities again. And these, airlines that are left, the regional carriers that are left, are the ones that are going to be doing that flying, because you're not going to fly a 737 into, Lawton, Oklahoma. Right. You know what I mean?
A lot of those cities were what they called
essential air service stuff.
Thank you. Yes, essential air service. And a lot of those cities now, after October 1st, no longer have airlines going in there, because the cuts to the feed or the schedule or the route have taken place or are taking place right now. So a lot of these essential air service locations are no longer going to have this feed. So like you said, Rob, when the time comes and the economy starts to pick up and people start to travel and, business starts to pick up, because, Zoom calls are great for, conducting everyday business meetings. But when it's time to make the deal, to follow, from the art of the deal, it's got to be in person. It's all about strategy. It's all about that connection, person to person connection.
Face to
sort of
face with a
speaking of that,
handshake.
right, exactly. And that's what I was going to say. The top brass and the executives are always going to have to go out there and press palms to close deals. So, right now things are kind of at a screeching halt in the business world in terms of, face-to-face meetings, being in the office, things like that. And I think what you are going to see, not to go off into a tangent here about other things, but the business world, I think that, if you have a company that's leasing 30,000 square feet of office space in some downtown high rise as it stands right now, okay, they figured out that we don't need 30,000 square feet. We can get that down to 10,000. We can have people in the office, instead of 5 days a week, 1 day a week, and have them work virtually. And this is actually a great thing that's going towards our bottom line. And I do think that that's going to be something moving forward. But sort of speaking to the point that both of you made, where the travel is going to come back. And I was watching someone on YouTube the other day, a guy that I follow who is a brilliant guy, has a great following, and he and a few of his guests on this particular podcast. It was a clip of a podcast. They were very bearish on the outlook of business travel coming back. And here's the thing: just like you guys are saying, the top brass are going to have to go out and spend a weekend with a client to address different needs to close the deal. They're going to have to go out and conduct site visits. Conventions and conferences are going to come back at some particular point.
I think they're going to explode.
People will work from home, but the conventions and conferences are still going to take place. Yeah. And people, like I said, the top brass still have to go out and meet clients and do site visits. So that's definitely going to be a thing. This isn't, and they said that after 9/11. They said, business travel is dead. They're all going to do teleconferencing now. Well, that didn't play out. Didn't last is a better way of looking at it.
Yeah.
And hopefully for our sake, it's going to come back even stronger than it was before, because it always seems to happen that way. When you have these downtimes, people think of ways to, those smart minds get together and, how can we make our business bigger, badder, and better than it was before? In this pandemic is now the time to do it. So when it comes back, boom, things explode. And, now you have this crazy, maybe back, hopefully we'll be back stronger than where we were before, so we can all upgrade and live a happy life.
Well, we still have population growth, and I guarantee you two things are going to go up exponentially probably in the next few months. People having children, babies, and people getting divorced. That's going to be
Can you elaborate on why you think that's going to be a thing? I'm curious to hear why you think this is going to happen.
It's enough said. It's enough said. So
do you have any supporting documents or facts?
So here we are, and add to that mix, the retirement age has not changed. And if you look at the numbers, that's actually helping us right now. That's helping junior pilots right now, because those retirements are still happening. I can't tell you, this last week I was out flying and I saw the ARF, Airport Rescue and Firefighting, staged at almost every single main hub that we were going to, not because of emergencies, but because they're sitting there ready with the cannon salute for retiring pilots. I know Charlotte, I know Dallas, I know LA, and I know JFK. They all are doing this, time permitting, on a daily basis, sometimes multiple times a day. So you're having just a crap load of pilots retiring. And that's just the people that are going at 65, not to mention those pilots, and my heart goes out to them. I've seen a few videos on the socials. Well, I didn't get my cannon salute. And my favorite is the captain that's sitting on the rear trunk of the convertible white Mustang, and all the people with the garden hoses, and he's in uniform, and he goes, I didn't get my cannon salute at work, so my neighbor hooked me up and I got a cannon salute at home. And it's precious. Awesome. And if I find it, I'll put it in the show notes. But so that's not to mention all of these guys that took early outs. That's helping us. That's helping the junior pilots at this time. On the last show, we mentioned the social media wars that are happening between senior pilots and junior pilots within the same group, which is absolutely ridiculous. It's no different than what the country is doing, divided with our political parties. So what we need to do is come together and find the common ground and just have a little bit of sympathy for each other and just be there for each other. With that said, I truly believe that what Rob was saying earlier about it coming back stronger, it's not smoke. And it's not an opinion. This is going to happen. The numbers, if you look at the numbers don't lie. With the retirements, with the growing population, with the fact that this economy is going to rebound, the fact that John Gruber, who was on the show just a few days ago, was talking about transporting his legacy aircraft that he was building in Redmond, Oregon, over to Illinois. and he rented a box truck and grabbed a couple hotel rooms along the way, and with a friend did a little 3-day trip to get this aircraft that he's building to his home airport. And he said hotel room rates were astronomical. Well, of course, because they're hurting for our business. So as we open up, whatever the solution is, whether that's a vaccine, whether that's a shot, whether that's wear the mask for the rest of your life until the day you die, or we become these video game characters with full face shields. Who knows what the solution is? But whatever the solution is, it's gonna come back, because how expensive was it to hold a conference in a conference center in Vegas pre-COVID? Well, I bet you if I had to have a conference with 10,000 people right now, I'd probably get a really good deal for the conference center and the hotel room rates and everything else. So when it does open up, and when confidence in the American traveling public, which I think is more important, when that confidence goes up, then I think this is going to rebound exponentially. And they're going to need pilots now. They're going to need airplanes now. That's why we don't want to furlough. That's why these CEOs are on our side. They're not on our side because they want to make us feel like, oh, you're part of the family. We're needed. A part number, and we're a wage. We're a dollar. We're a liability. So it's a cost that they're trying to save on the flip side, not now. So by keeping us all current, by keeping us all trained, by keeping the airplanes ready to go wherever they're parked in the country, when the confidence rises, we open back up, we can do it now instead of 6 months. So that's the way I see it. I don't know, Rob, do you agree?
I agree, man. I think Transglobal's stance kind of is the same thing. They want to have their pilots ready to go in the event that things return back to a rapidly return back to some resemblance of last year, which I feel it's going to happen. I think every airline is doing the best they can to conserve cash so that they can survive this, but they want to be ready to go the instant things start to open up. So I don't know. What do you think there, Z?
Yeah, I think the same exact thing. And, at Transglobal and the pilot group and the company met in the middle, and they made a deal, for some interim, basically concessions. The way that worked, we didn't concede anything on hourly pay rate. We didn't concede anything on work rules, scope, or anything like that. Basically, the way that it works is that we're all taking a monthly pay guarantee hit, and they divided the pilot group into 3 groups, the top third, the middle third, and the bottom third. But basically on that, I'm kind of like more towards the front of that, but not probably close enough to get into that middle group quite yet. But my group is going to take probably the most severe cut, where it equates to roughly a 50% pay cut based on the fact that it's not your hourly rate that was cut, it's the number of hours that you're guaranteed per month. Now, the thing is that there are a lot of exit triggers for this, which protect us. So, for example, if the company goes bankrupt, we're not entering bankruptcy on this concessionary deal, which is a very important thing, because you don't want to start your baseline of negotiation behind the power curve when you're going into bankruptcy. There's also other exit triggers too, based upon revenues and load factors. If we can hit a certain percentage of 2019 load factor and revenue, combinations for either 3 or 4 consecutive quarters, then this goes away. There's a hard sunset in 2 years, no matter what. That's the longest that this can go. And actually, we got a few things out of this too. We got a small pay bump whenever this does sunset. We got some improvements to deadhead, like first class deadheads now are gonna be the thing. We have some improvements to long-term disabilities, and actually we got some scope benefit on this deal as well. But the thing is this: a lot of people are looking at it saying, we took a concessionary contract, this divided the pilot group, and I don't think there was any way to come out of this without, in some capacity, dividing the pilot group. I hate to say that.
Yeah, I agree.
But at the same time here too, and I'm not a guy who drinks the company Kool-Aid and is just rah company, do whatever they say. I'm a fair guy. If the company comes out with something fair, I'll entertain it. If they come out with something that's unreasonable, to me it's kind of dead on arrival. But they came out with something that, okay, with the 9 different exit triggers that we have, okay, that's reasonable. I can work with that. And at the same time too, I don't want to take a 50% hit on MPG But, hey, if there's no one flying right now, the company cannot sustain paying everybody. It's an inevitability.
And I think that's the big headline right there is the company's not going to survive if they continue to operate, with the amount of money that they're losing per day. So these measures help the company and help us.
At the end of the day, the P&L is what matters most. And you mentioned.
What I think is that.
Go ahead.
I was just going to just add to it. I think that our union leadership, representing the pilot group, showed a lot of wisdom based on experience. They sat down and said, okay, let's think about every way that if we made a deal, we can get burned. Okay, bankruptcy, or what if the company holds back and other companies start flying, right? So we have something in there. One of the other exit triggers is an industry true up. So if other companies start adding flying, we have to match that. They can't hold back to just try to squeeze us a little, So they thought about these things. And at the same time, too, I think the company demonstrated good faith. I think that they looked at this and said, okay, we're in uncharted territories here. We need all hands on board. No tricks, no gamesmanship. Okay, we need a deal that's fair. And we know that this group's not going to take it unless it's fair. So I think they showed good faith. And I think that the union showed a lot of wisdom and experience in doing this. I mean, I'm not happy at the prospect of a 50% MPG hit. I'm going cash negative if that happens. I'm, at that point, just like the company, I'm now, not tens of millions of dollars a day, but yeah, I'm now going into my cash reserve. So hopefully this doesn't last long. And, and my optimism about this coming back is not based upon the bias from me wanting to see this rebound. It's based upon the numbers, like you guys are saying, supporting it. But the big thing is that the interim, you can't expect the company to keep shedding tens of millions of dollars a day. In this industry, you need to have not just a big cash reserve, but an unholy cash reserve. And this is exactly why, because things like this can happen. And when you're hemorrhaging $25 million a day, which is the average cash burn right now for a lot of these airlines, I don't care how big your cash reserve is. You can't sustain losing $25 million a day for very long.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize the airlines are hemorrhaging millions and millions of dollars a day. The operating costs for airlines are, even during the best of times, is huge. I mean, it is an exorbitant amount of money. And it needs, we need some kind of relief. We need some kind of, I don't want to say concession, but we need some kind of adaptation to the current situation financially to get through. And we never really said it, but the government views airlines as essential. To the commerce of the country and to the DOD and everything like that, mail and everything. So we need to move. We need to stay in business, and we need to be able to adjust to their needs too. So it's important that we be around for not only for our livelihood, but for the government and everything else, so that we can keep the country moving.
Absolutely. And that raises the question that, some people have sort of brought, to the sort of the center, if you will, now, which is, well, we're a capitalist society, and capitalism shouldn't reward companies that, that don't do well and can't turn a profit. Why are we bailing them out? Well, let me address a couple things on that. Okay. Yeah. First and foremost, what we're getting right now is through the CARES Act, and that's not to bail out the company. The companies are still losing at this point into the $20 million plus a day average, right? So the government's not supplementing those losses. What they're doing is they are offering some money to the airlines so that they can keep people on payroll and not dump that burden on unemployment.
Exactly.
Okay. To me, that's not a bailout. A bailout is basically, you run your company into the ground through the likes of bad decisions or just taking like an extreme amount of risk. And then I think right off the bat, when you use the term bailout, you have people that remember what happened in 2008 when we bailed out all the big banks, and they say, well, we shouldn't do that to the airlines. Well, the airlines didn't do anything wrong in this particular case. In fact, we were having, arguably like the best run that this industry has ever seen.
Right.
So again, this is helping people stay on payroll, not bailing out the airlines. The airlines are still hemorrhaging the cash. And here's another thing too. When the airlines were, quote, bailed out after 9/11, all right, let's put this in perspective here. the airlines were given money to survive because similar thing, the airlines didn't do anything wrong. Something happened that was well beyond their predictability, let alone their control, that basically took them from a position where they're making money hand over fist to just like that. They're hemorrhaging tens of millions of dollars a day, and you can't sustain that. So the government stepped in and said, right. And they said, all right, hey, we'll float you a little bit here. But what not a lot of people realize is that the airlines paid that money back. And not only did they pay it back, they paid it back ahead of schedule and with interest. So to me, that's not a bailout. That's an investment because you got your money back and you made a couple of points on it. So I'm not saying this is bias for what I do, but that's the reality of the matter. And speaking of your point, Rob, this would probably make for a separate podcast. It'd be pretty interesting to talk about this, but no one really stops and realizes how capital intensive it is to run an airline. People hear, well, if they're losing $20 million a day, that's their problem. That's because they're stupid and they don't know how to run their company. Well, no, if you know what actually goes into, let's just look at the debt servicing alone for an airline, right? That's the thing is that, just because you're in a downturn does not mean that your creditors don't still expect to be paid, and if you actually look at what airlines profit, before this happens, this industry was doing the best that it has ever done in the history of its existence, getting somewhere between a 10 to 15 cent on the dollar pre-tax. And that's pre-tax, mind you, profit margin, right? That's a horrible return in any business except an airline, because and the airlines, that's the best that they've ever done. Historically, it's between 2 and 5 cents on the dollar. And again, that's a pre-tax margin. Stop and think about that. Every dollar of revenue that you generate gross, you're lucky to profit between 2 and 5 cents historically, and then you pay taxes on top of that.
Right.
And that's not because of bad decision making. That's economic reality of how this business works.
Yeah.
If people really stopped and thought about what goes into this, okay, if they even bother to think about it, they think about the big ticket items. Okay, you have to buy airplanes, and there's fuel expenses, and then there's labor costs. But what do you think insurance costs, right? What do you think maintenance costs? You're talking about buying an airplane that has a unit cost just for a narrow body of tens of millions of dollars per unit. And you have airlines that have to have hundreds of them. And then per the average airline is going to spend probably 2 to 3 times that unit cost over its lifetime in maintenance of that asset. All right. Then you've got, just look at the training center, for example. I always tell people
training.
Not even training itself. What do you think the electric bill is at the training center every day? What do you think? How much wattage do you think it costs to run one of those simulators, let alone 40 of them?
And the air conditioning to keep those things cool.
I was just going to say, what do you think the AC bill is every day?
Every simulator has its own what they call the computer bay, right? And it's a room, usually a 20 or 30 by 30 room, and it looks just like a server farm. It's this full of computers and servers and the air conditioning and the lighting and the techs. That there's a tech for each simulator just to make sure, because it's a giant computer program that has multi-million-dollar hydraulics and visuals and everything else, and fire suppression. Like you said,
basically, like, what was the name of that movie? The Whopper 1000? War Games. It's like having thousands of those Whopper computers in a building, and that's what it takes to run these simulators.
And that's just each simulator, and that doesn't even account for the cost of the simulator. And those sims run 22 hours a day. At least they do at Legacy. I'm sure that most of the other major airlines have these sims running around the clock, because 2 hours a day, it's for maintenance, and they have to download and upload updates and whatnot, and upgrade software and take care of, going through inspections. No different than the aircraft. The aircraft, you have a 10 or 20 or $30 million airplane that is running 20 hours a day on average, maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more, depending on the fleet and the route. But the other downtime is maintenance, performing phase checks and repairs. And as you mentioned, Z, the complexity of running an airline in the United States and around the world really it's like its own city. If you stop and think about it, it's huge. And I've always said that running an airline, or the health of an airline, mirrors the health of the economy. And not just in the US, but around the world. So keeping us healthy. And like you said, it's not a bailout. It's a payroll protection program. What you're doing is you're keeping people off welfare. You're keeping people from having their house foreclosed on because, everybody's personal finances is their own business. But, you know,
Sure.
most people, I think in the country, last I read has about 4 months of money in savings or on credit cards that they could use temporarily to kind of float.
If it's even that much.
After that,
Speaking to
Yeah.
you know, especially, you know, when you're a pilot and you have a big family and, you know, you probably have a pretty nice house. And so after that, what happens? Then you go into foreclosures. Well, unemployment, foreclosures, all of these things don't show up immediately. They show up 9 months down the road. I think we're in for a rude awakening in this economy. In a few months.
I was going to say, I'm anxious to add this to your point is that, you know, keeping these employees employed, you know, I forget how many we were talking about nationwide, but throughout the whole industry, it's like, what, 80,000 employees throughout all the airlines are getting furloughed, not just pilots, but, you know, everything else. And then for every employee, it equates to about 10 workers outside of the airlines, which may get laid off. So, you know, all this payroll stuff is to keep those airline employees employed. That's key, because what's going to happen here in the next couple of months, we're coming up on the holidays and things like that, for the economy to keep moving and survive and improve, all the, you know, you're going to want to go out and spend your money for gifts and, you know, and things like that. So for these airline employees, they need that money to turn it back into the economy with their gifts, their travel, if, you know, all that stuff. If they're unemployed, that's, you know, 80,000 plus people in the country that are not going to be putting money into the economy. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And you know, they're going to be cutting, and not only that, they're going to be cutting services. You know, hey, I can't have that True Green guy come to my house anymore. I can't afford it. You know, I can't have like the guy cut my yard. So there's going to be other, you know, jobs outside of the airline industry. People are going to be losing their jobs there too. So it's a domino effect.
The airline industry employees that the 5M are talking about right now, the 5 mass media major outlets, they're talking about numbers like, 80,000 or 100,000 or 110,000 airline employees that would benefit from a payroll protection program. That is the tip of the iceberg that we can see. What we don't see is the mass of the iceberg underwater. Like Rob was saying, you have everything from cabin cleaning services, contracted out catering, fuelers and fuel trucks, and beyond that, the airport employees, airport electricians, airport police, and beyond that, it keeps going in layers and layers. We're talking about maintenance facilities. We're talking about manufacturing of aircraft parts, because when you park half your fleet, that means you're doing half the maintenance. That means you don't need to buy part number 447XYZ anymore because that part's not needed. So manufacturing is going to go down. And we're not just talking here in the US, we're talking globally. Even though we're talking about what's happening to us and what's affecting us, this is happening globally. So the iceberg is much bigger under the water, what we don't see. So it's the trickle-down effect. We've all been kind of saying the same thing. And that's why the payroll protection program, or the P2P, is so important here.
And, you know, let me clarify one thing here too. You know, there's got to be limits here. I mean, this can't go on forever. You know, now, I mean, I think that we are close to a vaccine, and I think that a vaccine will be a game changer. Now, some people might disagree with me, but, you know, where you had said a second ago that, you know, airlines are kind of like market indicators of the economy. I mean, go outside. And I think that, you know, if you look at COVID, I think that you look at people's behavior as market indicator of really where people are on COVID. And I think that a lot of people, I mean, I'm seeing people that, you know, they're going out and they're trying to live their lives as normally as they possibly can. Like right when this thing first hit, I mean, like you went outside and you thought you were in some sort of post-apocalyptic world. Nobody was on the street. Nobody was driving. Nobody was going to stores. Now it's like basically normal, except for the fact that everybody's wearing a mask. And, you know, even in a lot of situations too, people go to the beach and, you know, they're outdoors. They feel a lot more comfortable to not have a mask on, but they're going to the beach. They're not wearing a mask. They're being as normal as they possibly can. They're going to restaurants and sitting down and not wearing masks. Again, people, and what I'm trying to drive at here is I think people's behavior right now is a market indicator of the fact that they are over this, oh my God, we are all going to die because of this thing. I think that we figured out that, you know, hey, certain groups, based upon age or health conditions, are at far more risk than, say, a younger person. And based upon that, I think that if we can get a vaccine, and I hate to say it, and I won't go off on this tangent, but the vaccines are being politicized now.
All of it. All of it.
Yeah. Look, the FDA is not going to allow this to go out there if they think people are going to get sick, let alone die from this thing. Okay. I mean, politics aside, and I think, and people raise the point too. Well, why do you think it takes 2 or 3 years to get a vaccine? I'll tell you why. It's because of red tape and bureaucracy. That's why. And, this administration has cut through that. Okay. And we're at the point where we're going to get a vaccine, but the FDA is not going to let this out unless it's safe. So I think that between where, the market indicator of where people are based on behavior, as well as just the fact that if we get a vaccine, I think we're going to see things open back up. And, the thing is, okay, we can't go on forever with this, but I think we're on the precipice of a vaccine. One more round of this is the game changer to get us to where we need to be. I really believe that. And let me add one other point over here, too, sort of relative to what we were talking about a minute ago with bailouts and whatnot. Again, this isn't a bailout. This is payroll protection. And even when the airlines were, quote, bailed out post 9/11, they paid it back and they paid it with interest. So it wasn't a bailout. It was an investment. But even still, what not a lot of people realize, when you buy a ticket and you look at your airfare, I've heard numbers as low as 20% and as high as 30%, that airfare that you're paying, somewhere between 20 and 30% of that is going right to the government. And we're not talking about sales tax. It's going to supplement the TSA, the FAA, the local port authorities are getting a piece of that, right? And I believe the DOT and the NTSB might even be getting a little chunk of that money too. Yeah. So my argument, not my argument, it's my assertion here because it's factually true, is that in a way, the airlines supplement the government as it is. So, hey,
very good observation.
Why not have it work both ways? We're paying a good chunk of the government's expenses here with regard to certain things when times are good. So, hey, when times are bad, I don't think it's out of the question to float us on payroll, let alone maybe give us, maybe a temporary bridge loan at, say, prime plus 2 or 3 basis points. That's not out of the question.
Yeah.
Very good point.
Yeah. Excellent. And Matt, I really think that here we are, an aviation podcast talking about the journey of today's aviator and the challenges they expect. And we're pretty much got this, discussion going on where, I find
folks, this is the conversation we have in the cockpit a lot. When we're flying around, this is 2 pilots flying cross country right now. These are some of the conversations we have, whether we agree or disagree with each other. This is what we're talking about. This is it.
The only thing that's different is it gets interrupted by a radio call, or then in between it's like hit line select 3 left, then execute. That's why I didn't do that. Did you get the last time and fuel? Yeah, okay, all right, great. I'm sorry. Where were we? Oh, we were on 2 or 3 basis points above prime. Okay, yeah, let's go back
Global Memphis Center. You still here?
Yeah, hey Memphis, hold on a second here. We're trying to figure out the debt ratio if we pay 3 percentage points or 2 percentage points above prime. Okay, stand by.
I'm in the middle of a checklist. Damn it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, stick around for the second half of Squawk Ident right after the break.
it, man.
Well, see,
funny.
This is absolutely amazing conversation. I'm really happy that we were able to share this today. I want to get back a little bit to this and how this is going on, but I just wanted to wrap up your journey here before we kind of move on to some of the other questions that I had for you. And Rob has a few, I know, as well. In 2015, you got selected on the first round draft at Trans Global. How did that happen?
Well, they actually traded up for me. They traded 2 JFK landing slots and a used APU to American. So that's how it worked.
Those bastards.
It was. Never mind.
That's funny.
If they're going to trade something else, this is a family-oriented program. I won't say that. I'll behave myself.
But no, you feel free because I can always edit you out now.
Okay.
No, but seriously,
they were going to trade a couple. They were going to trade a couple of used jock straps for me, but they said we'd be better off with 2 landing slots and a used APU.
yeah. Well, that's a good trade, a very good trade.
It's a great trade.
Yeah. So I
felt very good, and I was at 9th overall in the first round. So
hey, that's not bad.
So
that's not a bad.
I get that going.
9 out of 8.
Nice.
That's pretty good.
Hey, first round. I'm on the back in the I got cut, man. I don't know. So in 2015, you went over to Transglobal, an airline name that's fictitious that we use here on the show, obviously to protect the fact that you don't represent your company in any way, and we don't represent ours, and therefore we use these aliases here on the show, which is, I think a wise decision. But you went over there and you told me something earlier that kind of blew my mind. You went from the right seat of an Embraer to the right seat of a 7576 for Transglobal. Mm-hmm. How did you get through that process of going from 3 stripes at a regional to 3 stripes at a mainline or a legacy carrier?
So, back in the day, the rule of thumb was no legacy airline was going to look at you unless you had a minimum of 1,000 hours turbine PIC. But the last decade, and the lack of progression in the industry rendered, and I'm sure both of you guys will attest to this, rendered a number of people, in a situation where because there's no progression, they couldn't upgrade. And it was through no fault of their own. And I think what started happening at the time, and Transglobal, I feel was one of the first companies to try to give this a shot, and a lot of others shortly thereafter followed suit. Is I think that they realized, hey, wait a second, we've got a lot of great guys and gals at these regional carriers who got stuck in the right seat through no fault of their own. So they don't have the turbine PIC experience, but they're type rated, they're 121 seasoned and pretty hardcore seasoned at that. And they've been doing this job for, upwards of like 5 to 8 years for a lot of them. Typically someone goes to a regional and times are good. They upgrade in about 1.5 years, 2 years. I mean, these people definitely have the seasoning and the experience. They know what they're doing. They can walk and chew gum at the same time. So, okay, back in the day, we used to look at turbine PIC as one of the qualifiers, but now that's not really a great qualifier. So let's look at some of these folks that don't have the turbine PIC. And I think that is subsequently what they did. And I think Transglobal was one of the companies to realize at first, and then again, a lot of them followed suit that, hey, there's some really qualified people here. So I think, as far as the lack of turbine PIC, I think that kind of answers that. And then, I'll tell you, man, it was a big jump going from, an Embraer 145 to a 7576. Any transport category jet airplane, whether it's a regional jet, or a 777, it doesn't want to go down and slow down. Momentum management is the real tricky thing. And I would say for me, transitioning to that airplane, that was the real tricky thing to learn is that, you've been flying the Embraer 145 for 7.5 years. You can fly that airplane almost instinctively because you're so good at it. And then you get to this other airplane, which is a big airplane, a lot more momentum, a lot more energy, but a very overpowered airplane at the same time. It's really just energy management. That was the biggest thing, getting used to the 7576. I'd say it takes at least a good 500 hours to get to the point where you are really rock solid comfortable with it.
Yeah.
But there's also some other things too. The Embraer 145, at Sandpiper, being a regional carrier, regionals are a lot more cost conscious. So I remember that the automation on the 145 at Sandpiper was a lot more basic and primitive. Now you get into this airplane that has this really cool thing called VNAV, which is like this, it's like this great mystery to figure out VNAV. So you're having to deal with learning how to do a descend via arrival on VNAV with all this, massive amount of energy behind you. And then, okay, wait a second. Why isn't this thing doing what I wanted it to do? Wait a minute, hold on. I got off the path. It went at a VNAV speed. Wait a minute, we're getting too fast. I gotta get the brakes out now. Okay, well, if I put the brakes out, how aggressive do I need to get? When do I need to get that aggressive? So that was the biggest challenge in getting to the 7.5. But I'll say 2 things. Transglobal has an awesome training program. The people there were great. Training, it was a little overwhelming because the thing about 7576, it is an older airplane when you really stop and think about it. And we have so many variations of them. We had 757-200s, and then we had 757-200s that had both Pratt & Whitney engines and Rolls-Royce. Then we had 75300s, 76300s, 76400s. So you have all these variants, and there's some subtle differences between them. So you're trying to master all that. as well as manage this airplane that's a beast of an airplane that you're not quite used to, with automation that you're not quite used to. But the training program was great, and the people there were excellent. I mean, I will say this, there were a number of times that I felt like a little overwhelmed. And, they'd say to you all the time, how do you feel? Do you feel like you're completely overwhelmed? Do you feel like you know less today than you knew yesterday? Yeah. Perfect. You're right where you need to be. Trust me, you know more than you think you do. It's all going to work out. And it did. It all came together at the end of training, and you really do know more than you think. And then I got to say, a lot of the captains that you fly with were very seasoned people who they really, said, hey, yeah, no, I get it. You're new. This is a tricky airplane. Here, let me show you something. This little thing about VNAV that they don't show you in the schoolhouse, and it works really well online. That type of stuff, like here, double clutch this. Now the VNAV will recalculate itself. And like, oh yeah, all right. It's not like a thing you're not supposed to do, but it's just one of those things that, you learn that on the line, and it's a technique that works, and you put that in your mental toolbox and you remember it for the next time. And eventually just repetition, like I can remember going into San Francisco was a little bit intimidating. Same thing with LA, because they're always bringing you in high and they're bringing you in fast. And, okay, I was a little bit nervous about that, but what it is, you do more of that. It's, you set it up. So it's like, okay, you know what? I want to fly the leg to LA because I want to get in that situation where they're bringing me in high and fast, because I want to get the repetition of knowing how to do this. And, as opposed to, I'll take the leg going back to New York, but when you do that and you get the reps, you get a lot more comfortable. Like I said, right around 500 hours, I felt really good in the airplane.
Yeah, nice. That's a common hours. We talk about that quite a bit on the show. It takes a good 3, 5, or 800 hours, depending on the equipment you are and your experience level, to really, before you can say, yeah, I know the airplane, I can fly the airplane. And you're always learning. You're always continuously finding out something new, even after decades of being on the same equipment or being back on that equipment. You're always learning some of the nuances. On the bus, we call it peeling the onion. You get on the airplane and you get to learn the shell of the onion and the outside layer. And you're like, oh, I can fly this airplane. Great. And then you get to the point where something happens and you realize, oh crap, there's another layer under this onion. And okay, now I got to learn this new layer, a little bit more in depth, more to the core of this airplane. And like you said, there's a lot of variants, a lot of different types, a lot of different engine configurations. So yeah, it's a lot. And especially going from an Embraer 145 with a relatively simple flight management system, or FMS, and then you're getting thrown into one of the more complicated flight management systems that Boeing puts out because of all of its features. And now you're being introduced to not just VNAV, but auto thrust and all kinds of, improved radar displays and so many more ICAM or ECAS messages to contend with, and all the new policies and procedures, having flown a relatively simple jet going into an extremely complex jet is pretty difficult to do.
I'll throw another thing into the equation too, and it's just transitioning to the airline is a little bit tricky too, because, different airlines. It's funny, Sandpiper was almost a carbon copy of Legacy in some ways, in terms of procedures, call-outs, profiles, what they called certain things. Like I remember at Sandpiper, after you take off, you go into the ACARs, or actually it would print out automatically. You'd get a flight prog, right? Well, we don't call that a flight prog. So I remember the first couple of times, I'm asking hey, how do I print a flight prog? A what? And you have to explain what it is. So there's a lot of these cultural things too, that when you go to this, to this new carrier, it's the same thing, but you have to learn their language, or you have to learn, their system of doing things. And what I would liken it to, not that I have the personal experience of this, but I would imagine it's probably like if you're a quarterback in the NFL, and you're playing at Miami and you get traded to Dallas, okay? You know the mechanics of how to take a 3-step drop and throw to the Z receiver on a slant, okay? But Dallas has a whole new verbiage for that. They have a whole new system of checks, alerts, and protections and this and that. You have to learn that language. So it's, the mechanics of what to do, but you have to learn their language and you have to learn their culture. So there's a little bit of a learning curve happening there, as well as learning this new airplane. And then, here it gets even better. Now you're going international too. And you're doing ETOPS, so you've got all this oceanic stuff that you have to start, learning, and that can be really tricky. I mean, I'd say it takes at least 4 good Atlantic crossings. Your first one you're going to do on IOE. Your IOE check camera will walk you through it, and you'll be like, okay, that was an eye opener. Then your second one, you're kind of relying on your captain a little bit, like, all right, so hey, this CPDLC thing here, is this logged on the right way? And who do we call first at this point? And then then what you notice is on the third one, like, okay, wait a minute, I kind of know what to do now, because I remember I did 2 of these before. And I'd say by your 4th one, you're like, okay, cool, I got this. But it takes a lot of that repetition. So you have a lot of things. You have the cultural thing, the airplane, and then the ETOPS and the international procedures. And a lot of these international destinations are a little bit different. Things like when you go into the UK, like when we fly here in the US, you're going into wherever, you're going into Dallas. Okay, we descend out of the en route environment into the terminal environment, and we're proceeding up towards the final approach unless we get told to go into holding. Well, in the UK, that's kind of reverse. You go into holding unless you are told to proceed inbound. So you have to, anticipate that these things are going to happen. And, it's not, there's different parts of Europe and different parts of the world that do different things. So it's figuring all that stuff out too. It's challenging. It's, you definitely have your hands full.
You went over there in 2015. How long were you on the 7576?
Isn't that about like 3.5 years, something like that?
What was the most challenging destination that you had to fly into?
Most challenging one. I don't know that it was so much the most challenging destination. I'd say the most challenging airplane was the 76400. The 76400, you either love the airplane or you don't quite love the airplane. And I was definitely more of the latter. I didn't really like the 76400. It was when you talk about energy management and learning the different aspects of automation. 76400 was a real bear, and it was a very senior airplane too, so I didn't get to fly it that much. But the one that I really loved the most was the 75200 with the Rolls Royce. That's without question my favorite airplane. But yeah, I don't know that it was so much a destination. Like I said, San Francisco and LA, because they bring you in pretty high, pretty fast. It's challenging, but once you get good at it, it's actually kind of fun doing those approaches going in there.
And what about your favorite international layover?
Venice. Only got to do it once, and it was for all the wrong reasons. But I'll tell you, great overnight, great city. I'd say the most beautiful city I've ever seen.
Bravo, ti piace Venezia? Eh? Did you ever go on a...
Yeah, it sounds familiar. I think someone said that over there.
Yeah, sure.
What's that?
I said, you like it in Venice, huh? And how long was that layover?
On a sign somewhere in the terminal.
How long was your layover?
That was at 24. Most of our Europes are 24-hour layovers, pretty standard.
Yeah. And now that you've transitioned over to a new type, what can you tell me what made you decide to change aircraft type?
It was more of a quality of life move. So I was in reserve 7576 most of the time. There were a few months that I held a line, and I still have no idea how or why, even at my seniority, I got a line like 2 or 3 times that had happened to me. For a while, reserve was great until one day someone at headquarters did something and flipped a switch, and reserve was no longer good. And when you're a commuter and you're on reserve, there's a lot of things you got to account for. So it was basically international reserve as a commuter was great. It was like a country club. It was a good ratio of sitting long haul, and then, oh, here's a really cool trip. Oh, and it's with a really cool captain. I like flying with this guy. Yeah, I want that trip. I'll go in tomorrow for that. It went from being great as far as that to all of a sudden, like I said, just one day a few years back, someone flipped a switch, and it wasn't so cool anymore. So I said, you know what? I can be like 41, 42% on the 737, and pick the overnights that I want to go to and hold a good line. Yeah, I think I'll go try that.
Is the 7.3 domestic division or?
Yeah, primarily, yeah. So I know some airlines had, international and domestic. We cover everything on both. So, 7.3, we do Caribbean, we do Mexico and, and Canada. When I think international, I think, to me, international is you're crossing an ocean. But yes, technically that would be considered international, and you do it as well. And
so how long have you been on the 7.3 now?
Just about 2 years.
And how'd that adjustment go going from a 7.5 to a 7.3?
So, like the old saying goes, a Boeing is a Boeing is a Boeing. So, the 7.3, you're kind of stepping back in technology. When people look at the flight tech on a 7.3 and they see all these flat panels, they think, oh, wow, cool. This must be like a really complex and advanced airplane. And don't let the flat panels fool you. It's pretty much 60s technology behind those flat panels back there. The 7.3 is a good airplane for what it does. My personal opinion, it should not have been stretched an inch beyond the 737-800. I think that's probably where Boeing should have limited that airplane out. But
you guys fly the 900, right?
Yeah, the 900 and the 900 ER, and we'll be getting the Maxes eventually. But I mean, the 7.3 is a good airplane, but coming off the 7.5, 7.6, the transition is easy because the Boeing system logic, and engineering philosophy, even though it's like stepping back a generation, is still there. And same thing with the automation. VNAV works basically the same way on the 7.3 as it does on the 7.5. So it was actually a pretty easy transition going to it.
Yeah. Z, where are you based?
Newark.
You're based out of Newark. Okay.
Mm-hmm. So you're still commuting then?
Yeah. I am. Yep.
Yeah. So what's a typical work schedule like for you? I mean, being on, I guess, your line or reserve?
So this month I'm a line holder. And so back that up a little bit, I haven't been flying for basically the past like 4 or so months because of everything that's been going on. And I actually dequalified on landings in June. So, I've been out of the loop here for a little while. And long story short, coming back into it just recently this month, when I went to go bid for my line, I didn't stop and think, about how much of a hit I was going to take in seniority. I mean, I'm still sitting at, just about 40% in the right seat of the 737. But what we call the G line, which is basically the cutoff between reserve and line holder territory, my seniority relative to the G line is like razor thin at this point. Whereas before this, when you're sitting at 40 something percent, you don't even think about that. So when I went and bid, I bid basically to try to work Monday through Friday with commutable trips. And if I can get certain overnights, I like doing a lot of Florida overnights in the winter. And then I like doing a lot of Boston overnights in the summer so I can be home. Right. So I didn't stop to think that, wait a second, maybe I should put some more protections in. And I kind of jammed myself up this month and ended up with a bunch of LaGuardia trips. Typically, that wouldn't be a bad thing because between Boston and LaGuardia, Delta and American run that shuttle, right? So, based upon that, where they're not running that shuttle, it's now getting pretty tricky to get into LaGuardia. So I'm having to use JetBlue. And fortunately, I was able to trip trade into actually some pretty good trips out of LaGuardia that can be commutable on both sides. So that's what I'm looking at this month. So it's a lot of 2 days, but the 2 days are great overnights. There are a lot of 2-day Fort Myers trips, and I think I got a Tampa sprinkled in there somewhere. We have a great hotel in Fort Myers. I really enjoy going down there. So that's what I'm looking at this month.
Yeah, you were there a couple days ago in Fort Myers. How was that layover?
It was amazing.
Yeah,
it's a fun layover. Yeah, we got a great hotel down there. They treat us really good. It's a nice resort. Flying with a great guy. A lot of laughs. Good time. Yeah, really enjoyed it. Yeah.
In your journey in aviation, you've pretty much hit the tip of the pyramid here. Here you are at a legacy carrier. You're done. All you have to do is stay safe, keep your medical going, and you have a long journey ahead of you at the tip of the pyramid.
Right.
What has been the biggest challenge to get to where you are now? And what do you think is the biggest caution that you have in the back of your mind to sustain this career through its longevity?
So I'd say the biggest obstacle to getting here is that, flying for a regional airline and, particularly being there in the last decade when there wasn't a lot of movement, there wasn't a lot of industry progression, it's like that. It's true. We talked about it earlier in the show here. It's trying to stay positive, and that's where you learn to stay positive and optimistic. You're going to encounter a number of people that they're not trying to be mean spirited to you. They're not trying to be negative in any way. They're trying to, they're trying to be realistic from their point of view. That they're going to tell you, none of the legacy airlines are going to hire him. No, they're not going to hire you. They're going to take someone who's got 10,000 hours. You don't even have any turbine PIC time, and this legacy doesn't hire people out of Sandpiper, and they don't want us to work there. And it's number one, a lot of those things are just not true. And obviously, a lot of people from Sandpiper did get hired off the street by legacy as opposed to Flow. And I remember that was one of the things you'd hear from people. They'll never hire you. You're from Sandpiper. It's not in their interest to hire you because they're losing pilots over here, so it's just trying to stay positive in the face of that, like, for example, one of the things I used to do, like if I had a long sit in Chicago, instead of going down to the crew room, where oftentimes with Sandpiper, you're just going to hear nothing but negativity.
Oh, yeah.
There was no shortage. Oh yeah, there was no shortage of negativity. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of Lego Pilot. The guy there. LOA 72 really screwed me, and I voted no. Work management. It's like that's all you'd hear down there. Yeah. What I used to do is I used to go and just take a walk in the terminal. One, you're getting some exercise. And two, you know what? I'd make it a point to go and talk with people, mainline pilots at American, mainline pilots at United. Just go walk the terminal, because you never know. You may meet someone who is, influential in the hiring process. Yeah. And what I used to do is I used to carry a cover letter and a resume for every airline that I applied to in my bag. And I used to update them like every 2 to 3 weeks so that I'd have the most updated one, because you very well may be walking the hallowed halls of O'Hare, and you might meet the director of pilot recruitment for American or for United. You strike up a conversation, have a cup of coffee, and they mention, I'm in the hiring department. Hey, I applied. I'm really trying to get on. In fact, I have a cover letter and a resume for you. Can I give it to you? Yeah, absolutely.
Nice.
In fact, I actually ended up getting an interview at JetBlue that way. It's a very similar way to that. I didn't end up getting it. That's a separate story in and of itself. I went through the process at JetBlue. I actually got through the first round of it, which it's a few years now, so I kind of don't remember all the particulars. But it's like phase 1 and phase 2. So phase 1's the interview, and I got the email saying, "Hey, congratulations, you passed your interview. Fill out all this paperwork, and we're going to do a background check and get back to you in 6 to 8 weeks." So I'm like, "Okay, great, this is awesome." So I filled it out, and like clockwork, I got a phone call 6 to 8 weeks later. They said, "Hey, we got all your paperwork here. Everything's good. Your background check's fine. Your PREA stuff is good. Here's the deal." And this was the spring of 2014. They said, "We're coming up in the summer months. And, because we're going to have a big uptick in flying like we do every summer, we're going to take some instructors out of the schoolhouse and put them on the line this summer. So we were anticipating getting, the group that you interviewed with into class sometime around the end of June, beginning of July. It's probably going to be more like August. So stand by and we'll get back to you." So I said, "Okay, great, no problem." And they did get back to me, except it was in the form of an email saying, "You know what? We changed our mind. Thanks for playing. Reapplying 6 months." No explanation, no nothing. And come to find out, that happened to like 20 or 30 other people in the process. In fact, some number of months later, I went to a JetBlue job fair, and I got no explanation as to why that was. The reasoning, why just whatever. We're not going to hire you. And I brought all my paperwork with me and presented it to someone over there, and I'm showing it to this particular person, and they're like, "Yeah, this doesn't make sense. Like, you're in phase 1. Okay, here's your background check. Yeah, everything's good. I don't understand why they did this." And as I'm standing there, some other person, job fair attendee chimes in and goes, "Excuse me, I wasn't eavesdropping on your conversation, but I couldn't help but overhear it. The same exact thing happened to me, and I was kind of coming here today trying to get some insight as to what happened here."
Yeah.
And he said, "All right, give me both of your names. I'm going to look into this. I'm going to call you guys back." And let's just say I'm still standing by my phone. Still waiting. That phone call.
Oh man.
Right. And look.
So if the phone call does come, what are you going to say? Just kidding.
Thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah, no, I know.
But look, I'm not trashing JetBlue when I say this. So JetBlue is a great airline. I have a lot of admiration and respect for them. But in terms of staying positive, I mean, I'll admit, like, oh yeah, that was like a devastating blow emotionally.
Sure.
It's like, whoa. I thought that I got this big break finally. And then, talk about just, getting stuffed on the 1 yard line on 4th down of the Super Bowl. That's what it felt like. And then, you know what? Here's the silver lining. TransGlobal called a couple months later, and it all worked out.
There you go.
So
nice. The universe has spoken.
Bringing this back full circle. Right. It does. So stay positive, be prepared. And, hey, when one door closes, another one will open.
Absolutely.
It's just, this is a gut check industry. If you're not serious about doing this.
Well, you alluded to it earlier, I think Tony did, that, these situations are, we get put in these situations where, if you quit, you walk away. Most people will do that. Well, just think about that same situation in the cockpit. If you're dealt with a situation that's, emergency situation, and oh my God, this didn't work. I'm checking out. You can't do that in the cockpit, and I'm not going to hire somebody who's going to do that in the cockpit, let alone, on the ground, checking out after the first, nope, sorry, we're not going to hire you. Yeah. Or, you know what I mean? So
Yeah, if you get deflated after this first snow, you're in the wrong industry.
exactly.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you just gotta stay at it and keep on grinding. Sort of where we started off with this thing. Right now we are in a down time. But hang in there. This too will pass. This industry, has proven by many precedents here that this is what this industry does. It goes through, it's cyclical. It goes through these things. It's a resilient industry. It will come back. People will need to travel. The industry will look different. There'll be consolidations and mergers. It's going to happen, but the industry will stay intact. As they say, we will live to fly another day.
Yeah. I remember back in the day, 30 years ago, I guess, maybe not that long ago, that I had a cultural anthropology teacher tell me one time that humans are nomadic. We travel, we move, we have since the dawn of time, cavemen and whatnot. And we're going to continue to do that because by nature, that is who we are. And the most efficient way to do that is through air travel. So yeah, you're absolutely right. This will continue and will continue for until man is no longer a part of the universe. I wanted to ask you a couple questions about technology. What is your go-to aviation app right now on your phone?
On my phone? Let's see, what is it? So what's that app? What is it? What do we list on for other airlines? Is it My ID Travel? Yeah, that's probably my most frequented go-to aviation app on my phone. So, getting me to and from work.
Yeah. And do you have any nightmare commuter stories you'd like to share?
Yeah, I've had a few of them over the years, and I think anyone who's commuted has. I mean, I can recall one day finishing up in JFK, and it was a weather day, bad snowstorm. I think it took me from when we blocked in to when I got through the door at my house. It was 12 hours later. It was just one cancellation and one bump off after another to finally get out there. And then they closed down the departure corridor heading northeast. So all northeast fixes were ground stopped. And then we got in the air, and now Boston had shut down, and we're going to be getting it close to bingo fuel. I mean, I'm sitting in the back, but I knew in my mind, like, okay, and I know we got alternates, but we can't be holding up here for hours. And then finally, we just barely got in, based upon, otherwise we would have had to divert. But I think that's my most prominent one. But I'll tell you, I'd love it if Transglobal, would put together a Boston base, and fingers crossed, hopefully one day they will. If you can avoid commuting, folks, avoid it. Right. But a lot of times it's unavoidable, just kind of is what it is.
Yeah. And I think we talked about if you move around the system, the amount of times the company rebases you or displaces you, I think I counted on, it was probably 12 times I would have moved in the last 12 years,
right?
15 years. You can't do it. You just got to find a place you're willing to commute out of, and pick a place you're willing to commute to, and just roll with it.
And Rob, I remember when we were at Sandpiper, Sandpiper's, their official company position was, well, commuting is a lifestyle choice, and it's your decision to be a commuter. Well, the reality of it is this, bases come and bases go, and so do equipment types. And just like you said, look at the fluidity of it. Just a dozen times over the course of you being at Sandpiper, you would have had to make some pretty significant changes. When you have and a lot of pilots have families, and as a family, you have a second income, from your spouse that's contributing to your household income month over month. Okay. The issue now becomes, just because you got bumped off of an airplane and you can't hold this base, doesn't mean that your spouse that has a job that's tied to that location is going to get bumped out of theirs and just by happenstance find a comparable job that pays the same and has the same, hours and days off so they can take care of the kids for them to go and move. So, the whole assertion that, well, commuting is a lifestyle choice, and I disagree with that. It's a lack of choice. And particularly, like with regional airlines, and I think I touched on this earlier in the show, you're not paid a lot of money, and the expectation is that you live in base, and they're asking you to live in some of the most expensive cost of living per capita cities in the country. Yeah. I mean, you got to look at that. I mean, it's a give and take thing. And Transglobal, I think that they're reasonable with commuters. They're fair. They get it. But, I do think that, particularly with the regional industry, I think there needs to be more understanding, and meeting the commuters halfway, because it's not a choice. It's really a consequence that's forced on you. And the whole, just move. It doesn't really work that easily.
Yeah. To LA, New York, Miami. No way.
Even Chicago, yeah.
Yeah, Chicago too.
Chicago.
I mean,
Yeah.
how can you afford a single family residence?
And not to
in New
diss
York.
those areas. I love those areas, but it's just cost of living is just
Right.
astronomical. You know,
It's economic reality. Yeah, like I said, I mean, 60 grand a year there, you can't even be broke. You're actually under what it takes to be at sea level. You know,
yeah, and we're making less than the firefighters and the teachers and all that stuff, especially on the first year pay, second year pay,
Right.
and those people don't even live in those cities. They have to commute in, from other areas. So I mean, it's crazy.
You remember when they added the clause in our FM1 or our flight manual indicating at the regional, indicating if you are collecting subsidies from the government, do not show up in uniform.
Yeah.
Because your pay was so low.
Yeah. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is, and that was one of the company's rebuttals at Sandpiper was, there's people that are making less than you at this company that can afford to live there. And it's like, well, yeah, probably through government subsidy, like that's got to be the only way that could be. And I'm not trashing someone who's on government assistance. I don't want to misconstrue the wrong conception with that, but just now speaking to your point, now the company's like, oh yeah, see other people are living there. Why can't you? And then they have this, like, hey, by the way, don't show up to, to get government assistance in uniform. Like, oh, hey, hold on. Some things here that are, diametrically opposed, shall we say?
Yeah.
And I just went through this thought process, when we worked at Sandpiper after the bankruptcy and the mergers and all that stuff, when they started closing down the bases in Boston and, San Juan, Miami. I mean, we were all there for that kind of LA, it forced a lot of people to commute. And I think, our union, the MEC chairman, who's from your area, we all know him. At the time, I think him and the group of guys there at the union did a great job of negotiating a lot of commuter benefits, like hotels and positive seats and all that stuff, which was, kind of unheard of in the industry, to the point of, what we're just talking about. It's, hey, it's your choice to commute. Well, these people didn't have a choice. That was keep your job. You had to commute. And, it was very, very awesome that all worked out that way. Cause I think a lot of people, certainly benefited from that.
It's funny that you mentioned that particular person, because I was talking with him on the phone last night, mentioning that I was coming on your guys' podcast.
Oh, cool.
And I said, yeah, hopefully this becomes like a recurring, like how cool for that podcast to have, like, kind of like Min was like a recurring character on Seinfeld. Although I like, I don't want to be Newman here. I mean, in this metaphoric example, like it'd be cool. I think for this type of podcast, if you guys had, like recurring roles from people from different airlines to, hey, what's the buzz at Transglobal? What's the buzz at Acme?
Absolutely.
Or so on and so forth. But I was talking with that guy last night and saying, yeah, hopefully this turns into something like that. And he said, hey, if they do that and they want to pilot from one of the ACMI characters, tell him I'll come on. So he's a free agent. He's willing to play ball.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. We'll have to talk about that after the show for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Reach out. I'm sure he'd love to hear from you.
So in all your time in this journey that you've had, what would you say has been the highlight?
Honestly, I think making it to the level of working for a legacy carrier, it's like you alluded to, you've made it. And I mean, I describe it to people, I like to use a lot of metaphors, a lot of different analogies, and particularly as they relate to sports. I said, it's the equivalent of making it to the major leagues. You've progressed up from, playing at the college level to playing, AAA, single A, and now you are at getting, in the majors, and not just in the majors, but, you're playing for, and I can get in a lot of trouble for saying this as a Red Sox fan, but, it's like putting on the pinstripes and playing for the Yankees, like that's like, hey, you've not only made it, but, you're in one of the front runner premier teams in the league. Now I'm going to deny that I said that as a Red Sox fan, but
I'm a Red Sox fan too, but I get what you're saying.
Yeah. Nostalgia and sentiment and, and that type of a metaphor is definitely on the side of the Yankees. You can't say it's not. It's like wearing the pinstripes.
Yeah.
Totally.
And see, if you could go back in time and whisper in your own ear just for a moment as a younger self, what would you tell yourself?
I don't know. I really thought about that. Just listen to yourself. Apparently listening to myself has done all right to get me, up to Transglobal and, the level of the industry that I'm really happy with being at. So, maybe I guess just, kind of, expanding on what I was saying earlier, just, have confidence in yourself to get through the difficult times, avoid the noise, avoid the negativity. There's a lot of people that, are gonna push those sentiments on you, not because they're necessarily trying to. I don't even think sometimes people realize that that's what they're doing to you. And I'm sure I'm probably guilty of that at certain times too.
Yeah, we all are. Yeah.
But yeah, just have at it. Like I said, if I listen to every little thing that I heard about, Legacy will never hire someone from Sandpiper, and the Legacy Airlines as a whole will never look at someone like you. You don't have the turbine pick time and the this and the that, and they're not even going to hire. Period. They're all going to go bankrupt. We're all going to be out of business. LOA 72 really screwed me.
Work.
Right.
Union.
FO hadn't stabbed me yet. Just wait.
Right. Just wait. Yeah. It's not over. But no, I mean, if you just get so consumed with that, it's the metaphor that I use for stuff like that. It's psychological warfare. Don't commit psychological warfare on yourself. I mean, yeah. Just have at it. And I think if you're trying to progress to that level, network, carry those resumes and cover letters with you, update your stuff frequently, keep your logbook up to date. I was ready to go for an interview like that because I was that serious about wanting to get out of Sandpiper and get up to working at the Legacy level. Yeah. You get an interview, now you're like, oh my God, I got an interview. I got to prepare for this. And now I have to find my birth certificate, my social security card. I have to get sealed copies of my college diplomas from the institution. Photocopies won't cut it. I need this, I need that. That was all ready to go. I had that in a little box, basically waiting to go. I had the suit in my closet, already pressed, waiting to go. Yeah. I had the resumes and cover letters in my bag, waiting to go. Be prepared because, when opportunity knocks, it may not knock again, or may not knock for a long time. So be ready at a moment's notice. Be prepared. Yeah. Don't get caught up in that noise.
I've heard people say also in other podcasts, people say, don't be afraid to fail. You know what I mean? And don't take failure as, failure, take it as a lesson. This is a lesson learned. Same thing in aviation. There's going to be a lot of no's and, you're not ready yet. And, you can't do that. But, you just got to find another way, be like water, flow, go with the flow, find the opening and, use that to your advantage.
Yeah. What do you call 1,000 failures behind a success?
Rob's life.
A success.
That's right.
Yeah. Success. Yeah, isn't that how Edison made the light bulb? Figured out 1,000 ways not to make it, and then he found the one way to make it.
Exactly.
That's it.
Exactly.
Yeah. See, if you can go back and think about one person that made the greatest impact in your career in aviation, who would that person be?
It's a good one. Maybe I should have prepared for these types of questions a little bit better. I'm kind of flying by the seat of my pants as opposed to.
If you listen to our podcast more often, these are the questions we ask everybody. No, just kidding, man. Go ahead.
I gotta really think about that. There've been a few of them along the way. I don't know that I could narrow it down to one in that aviation realm. But mentorship, I think, is really a big thing. I'm a firm believer in it. In fact, I'm trying to spin up a little side business, into doing sort of like mentorship and personal consulting, not just for aviation, but for a number of other things. So coming soon, some details will be out. It's sort of a work in progress, which should be spun up very shortly. But no, I'm a firm believer in mentorship. And there's one guy in particular that I fly with at Transglobal. Great guy. I started flying with him on the 757. Become pretty friendly with him. And he's a very learned individual. And kind of sidebar for a second. As crazy as this is going to sound, the first time I met this guy, I'm not even being funny. I thought this guy was nuts the first time I met him. Right? Not like nuts, dangerous, but the first time I met this guy, it's just I don't quite know how to describe him, but he's a character, but in a good way. And I gotta say, this guy seriously starts to grow on you after a little while and actually becomes a very entertaining individual, but at the same time, an extremely knowledgeable guy. And he's the type of guy, like I said, VNAV to me at first was this, it was like the Holy Trinity. It was this great mystery that, could not have been understood by us mere mortals. At least that's how I perceived it. And I remember flying a trip with him, and he was showing me all kinds of cool things, like hey, right now the reason why it's doing this is because you already started down on the initial descent, so it's left the box left its cruise phase here. If you want it to recalculate a path direct on the vertical profile, just double clutch this. And like, wow, like that's really cool. Like that, like they never showed me that at the schoolhouse. He's like, yeah, it's just one of these things you learn on the line. And then you learn a lot of things from him too about, just the company culture and, different things. And just, I ended up really becoming good friends with the guy. And I talk to him on a pretty regular basis still. He's still in the 7576, still based out of New York. So there've been a handful of people like him that I've flown with over the years, and they're always good references to talk with. I remember in particular, this particular individual, he's passed away now. He was an old TWA guy who ended up at American, and I met him when I was in training at Sandpiper, and he was very much a mentor of sorts, and he flew with them ended up finishing his career over with American. And he's the type of guy that coming up the ranks would always call him up and, hey, what do you think about this? Or, I'm trying to get hired over here. Do you know anyone that works in the recruiting department or anything like that, or anything you can tell me or any information you can get, or, hey, what's going on, right now at American with this, that, and the other thing. So a lot of people like that. You end up making a lot of contacts that you become friendly with. And, you develop a lot of great relationships that way.
Nice.
Yeah, and it's important to be that person as well. As you've had a really good run so far, and now you're in that position where now you can be that person. And I know you mentioned, you really have a lot of affinity for the mentorship programs and the mentors and mentorees out there, and that's really a lot of what this show is about. It's about giving those interested in aviation, maybe starting out in aviation, or those just listening and that are in it, that like to hear it, because that's all we talk about, right? Like we mentioned earlier, work, contracts.
Yep.
But that's really, the show is geared to getting the knowledge of what the journey entails, the challenges that are associated with it, and hopefully we're scratching the surface with that a little more with every episode. Now, you mentioned earlier on in the show some of the ways that Transglobal has decided to help mitigate the payroll issue, to help, suspend the idea of furloughs for a little bit longer. How has this COVID reaction affected you personally?
Well, here's the thing. I mean, I think initially when, like the whole world was in this, shut down, everybody stay indoors, don't come out of your house, oh my God, we're all going to die phase. It's like, like the world like shut down. And human beings, like we're not meant to function in an environment like that. So, that was a little strange to say the least to deal with it. And I can remember doing one particular trip. I think I was supposed to be doing a 4-day trip. And as I'm commuting out, I get the alert that, okay, there's been a pairing change. And I ended up with basically one leg down to Fort Lauderdale, stay there for 3 days and then fly one leg back. And the first part of me is thinking like, whoa, this is really cool. Fort Lauderdale, staying at the W. Yeah, 3 straight days of this. This is going to be awesome, until you get down there and it's in the midst of this whole, the world is shut down phase. It was like living in some sort of like post-apocalyptic world. Like I actually remember going through the W in Fort Lauderdale, walking through there, and I'm like pretty much the only person there. Like literally, I'll take it back. The kid working the front desk was the only other human being that I saw for about 5 straight minutes, right? And it's just the hotel is empty. And psychologically, like that has an impact on you. It's like, whoa, like what is going on in the world? It's like there's nothing there. And then off in the distance, I can see like this one cruise ship that's anchored up a few miles off the beach, just sitting there and like nobody around, nothing but silence and the wind rustling through the palm trees. Sitting up at the pool and seeing this cruise ship out there again, just sitting around with like nothingness. And I'm like, oh, this is like kind of creepy. And I ended up being there for about 2 straight days. And it's like, okay, get me out of here. I'm ready to go home. This is no longer cool. I thought this was going to be fun to be at the W for 3 straight days. Now it's not. Like, okay, I'm ready to go home. So I think everybody felt that.
Your first impression was beaches, booze, and Battlestar Galactica. And now it's like
and bears and beats.
Oh my God.
It was, man. It wasn't quite like that, So I think everybody went through that phase of like, whoa, what just happened in the universe? Like
it's a lifestyle for us. You know what I mean? It's a lifestyle for us. You go to these overnights and that's kind of your, I don't know, maybe not for everybody, but for me, that's kind of my get away from the nuances of just life, being at home. I love my wife and kids, but going to work was like, yeah, hey, I get to go to New Orleans, I get to go to Fort Myers, I get to go to LA and all that, and go to these places for a short period of time. But I want to go out and go to a local brewery or place to get some good food, see the people and see the sights and sounds. And now when COVID hit, it turned in from I look forward to going to like, oh man, I got to go to this place. There's nothing open. You can't even get anything at the hotel restaurant. There's one dude working the whole hotel. It was depressing. It's getting better, but it was just really depressing.
Yeah, it was. And I mean, there was a period there where I'm just like, I don't even want to go in. Like, it's just going to be like a free ring circus. It's going to be, everybody paranoid to shake hands. And then, what are you doing without a mask on? And,
oh yeah.
And then, like you said, you go to the hotels and it's, there's nothing to do. And if you can find something to eat, it's takeout only. Bring it back to your room and sit there and, self-isolation.
Gyms are closed and, you can't go to a hotel gym anymore. Some of these have really nice hotels. And then Tony and I talked about this in a previous podcast. We'd go to some of these overnights and go to the gym, go for runs and stuff like that. I guess you could still go out for runs, but some places, like Hawaii, I guess now you can do it. But before, there was things that you just flat out couldn't do. And for me, going to these overnights, that's when I did a lot of my workouts, because that's when I had the time to myself and focus, not have to worry about, getting home to make dinner for the kids and all that stuff. So, things changed drastically.
Yeah, that was our time. I mean, unfortunately, we have actually had information come down that here at Legacy, one of our crew members was detained in Hawaii because they were sitting in the park by the hotel eating some to-go food. And according to their lockdown procedures for air crew, you can't do that. You can leave the hotel at least up till now, and I know that's going to be changing here in the next couple days. But up till now, we had to sign on this document. The National Guard would take your temperature on the jet bridge before you even get off the airplane. You'd have to sign a release indicating that you're aware of the flight crew isolation rules. And the hotel was closed to the public. The only people staying there, at least the one in Honolulu, were the two Legacy Airlines flight crews, the Dallas crew and the LA crew. And the rest of the hotel was empty. Like you mentioned, the only person there is really the person at the front desk. You could leave to go get food or to do personal exercise by yourself. Like you might have been flying together with, the other pilot on the flight deck, 2 feet apart from each other for the last 6 hours. And you're in the hotel van or the van service with the rest of the crew. So now there's 9 people in a small van, and you get to the hotel. But now when you go exercise outdoors in the fresh air, you had to do it by yourself.
Solo.
Solo. So, and this was an issue, and they're really cracking down on it. So it's very scary. Thankfully, things are starting to open up, and we're going to see, because I keep hearing about this second wave and third wave and second lockdown. And
it's fear mongering, I think.
I agree with that. And I'm not trying to get into a political tangent here, and I'll do the best I can to sort of curtail and sort of focus my comments here. But I can't help but think that a lot of this is political theater and dramatization mixed with virtue signaling. And I'm not saying that I do not believe that there is really a thing. Like, there are some people out there that are saying, like, this is all made up. There's no virus. Okay, look, there is a virus. I will admit that. But I can best describe it by saying this, okay? It is something. It is a thing. It warrants mindfulness and it warrants caution. Things like, hey, stay 6 feet away from people where and when you can. Okay. Like maybe carry a spray bottle of rubbing alcohol with you and wash your hands a lot more frequently. Okay. I get it. Things like that. But I think that this is something that, it's something that in reality is about this big. And we're being told that it's this big.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
It's being epically blown out of proportion. And again, I think that there's a lot of politics, political theater and virtue signaling. And the net result of it is it's hurting the rank and file person. And again, go back to what I said earlier about the market indicator of human behavior. People are trying to live their lives as normal as they possibly can. And, you have some people that, like New York, for example, they just shut down 3 boroughs of New York, non-essential businesses.
I heard about that.
Right, because of a 3% uptick in reported cases. But, okay, what about cases? What, not hospitalization.
No.
not ventilization, not death, cases.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's like, there's people out there making the assertion that, well, Americans want to be safe, which is true, but Americans also want to live their lives too. Human beings want to be safe. Human beings also want to live their lives too. And I do believe that, you can do two things at once here. And, I just think that this stance, this overly aggressive reaction to it is harming a lot of things. I mean, I understand that there is a health issue here and I get that, but there's also a consequence to locking the world down. Suicides are going up as a byproduct of drug addiction, domestic violence, alcohol abuse. And this is what happens when you force people to stay in. I mean, human beings weren't meant for this. There's another flip side to that. So anyway, I'll end rant and exit my soapbox on that.
That's awesome. But I was going to say, there's statistics. I'm sure there are statistics being that are not being taken that are way more dramatic or way higher numbers than the actual COVID cases themselves of mental health. And, just think of all the kids that haven't been going to school. They're not getting their, a lot of kids, families depend on schools and districts to feed their kids, going to school and, no internet education, the mental, there's so many, different things that, can be staticized. I don't know what the real word for that is, but are far more dramatic than actual COVID deaths and cases themselves.
Yeah.
But Rob, even speaking to that point right there, okay, when I was a kid, I would have been thrilled initially at the prospect, we're getting out of school. This is awesome. But then you don't get, that's cool for a couple of days, but then you don't get to see your friends because, I remember as a kid, you griped about and bellyached about going to school, but you got to see your friends and you got to, play sports and, hang out and goof off. And kids need that. They need social interaction with other kids.
Totally.
And then the other thing too is, we're going to do virtual learning now. Hold on a second. This might work. What we do. We do a lot of distance learning for certain things before we go to recurrent training. And that works for a refresher training, but for primary instruction
does not substitute.
That does not. No, there's no sub. You need.
You don't want me flying your airplane without any real time flying an airplane.
Right. It's, if this distance learning thing, it's one of these things that you can put a Band-Aid on it for maybe a month or two, but we can't have kids going to school. And I want to turn this into a talk show about other things, but no, kids need to be in an environment with other kids where they can learn. It's it's kind of like how we, in our industry, we've gone from, remember the old ground school, the ground school days of, you have 20 people in the classroom Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. And now we transition to the AQP method, which is really cool, of this 1-on-2 environment with you and your stick buddy and the instructor. You know what I'm talking about? I assume you guys do the same thing at Legacy. Mm-hmm. All right, it's pretty much the whole industry shifted to that. And I think that's a cool concept and it works and it is quality training. But I do kind of miss the old days of when you had, 20 people in a classroom because, one, it built camaraderie, but two, somebody would ask a question and you'd say, whoa, you know what? Yeah. That's a good question. And I didn't even stop to think about that, let alone the fact that I don't even know the answer. I don't know what I don't know. Cool, let's debate this. Let's talk about this. That's where real learning takes place.
Yeah. That's exactly what I go through.
Exactly.
I depended on those kind of environments to ask the questions that I didn't even know to ask.
Exactly. Yeah.
And all of a sudden it becomes wow, that's good to know,
Yep.
So Z, I was very interested and entertained with your YouTube channel, Life by Z. What can you tell me about that?
So it's a channel that I started about a year ago, and it was kind of more of a boredom thing. I've worked with some people, over the years, just trying to, just informally giving them advice. And, they said to me, hey, you got really good advice to give. You have really good insights on things, you should think about maybe starting a YouTube channel or, maybe starting a business where you can do something like this. And I said, all right, I've heard this from a few different people, maybe where there's smoke, there's fire type of thing. So I just kind of started playing around with the YouTube channel a little bit, put together a couple of little videos. Some of them are just, me sitting there talking about different things. Other things, it's, I don't know, me out in the boat going fishing or cooking something, things that I enjoy doing. So it's just more of a little passion project and sort of like a boredom thing. But I'm at the point now too, where I'm trying to separately spin this off into starting a business, where people say, hey, you've got good advice, you've got good insight. Trying to, spin this into, I guess you would call it, and I hate using the expression life coaching, because I think that term's a little bit too generic and cliche. I look at it as more as personal consulting. And, that's just something that right now it's a little project I'm working on. I have a website that's in development, should be coming out here very shortly. It'll be lifebyz.com once it's all spun up. The YouTube channel is just called Life by Z. But yeah, that's basically what I'm doing. As pilots, I think that, we have the luxury of having a little bit of downtime when we're not flying the friendly skies, so to speak. And, based upon that, why not have a side hustle, and particularly a side hustle where you can make a positive impact on people's lives by mentoring and by being, a life consultant of sorts. So that's what I'm going to be doing.
Yeah. And I really like your video that has the most views right now, from what I can gather here, is Winning at Life 8 Thoughts on Coronavirus. I mean,
right.
How did you come up with that idea?
All 200 views. I think, it's, and this channel really is kind of in its infancy, and I really haven't pressed very hard to, market this to mass numbers of people just yet, because I wanted to kind of get comfortable with making videos, editing them, putting content out on a more consistent basis. Of course, that's what I got to do. I have to be more consistent with putting content up. But, now basically, I think that video was just kind of when COVID was becoming like a real big thing. I just said, well, hey, this is the hot button thing that everybody's talking about. Why not just put a video together and just do something with it. So yeah, that's where I'm at with that.
Nice job.
Yep.
Yeah, between that and when you bake that lobster, I really like that one too.
Yeah, you like that? Yeah.
I'm a foodie myself,
I might want to do. Oh yeah, as well as all kinds. What do I have? I have lobster on there. I've got Sunday gravy, linguine fruit de mare. Yeah, there's a bunch of them. It's if you're trying to cook to impress someone, you may want to check the channel out over there. And I'll tell you what, as far as cooking, believe it or not, simple things. People think you got to do these really elaborate, intricate things that take a lot of skill and a lot of time. That's actually very basic things.
Yep, I married a culinary school grad, so
congrats, my friends.
Yeah, the way to Italians hot is through their stomach. You know what I'm talking about?
I do.
Well, Z, I want to thank you for taking the time to sit down with us and discuss everything that's going on with how the coronavirus has been affecting our industry. Your journey has been a spectacular one to learn about, and I wish you all the best in your future over at Transglobal. And just, hey, thanks for sharing your insights. Some really good stuff.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's great talking to you guys. I always enjoy getting out here and talking shop about the industry. And it's been a pleasure having you on. Look forward to coming back sometime. And thanks for flying Z and Transglobal. And we look forward to seeing you again on your future travels.
Absolutely. And if anyone wants to follow you on your socials, so where can they find you?
So, like I said, it's coming soon. It'll be lifebyz.com. Okay, that's going to be the website that I'm working on, which is under construction as of right now. And I got to admit, I'm a little bit behind the power curve on setting up a formalized Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram account. So all those things will be coming under the auspice of Life by Z, coming soon to a social media platform near you, and coming very soon at that. So check back frequently.
Wow, well, thank you again for sharing your story with us. And I just want to say thank you for all of the listeners out there. If you're enjoying Squawk Ident, we encourage you to visit our website at aviatortony.com. That's Alpha Victor, the number 8, Romeo Tango Oscar November Yankee.com. There you can leave us feedback, you can contribute to the podcast, and help us keep the podcast going. You can also leave audio feedback, show topic ideas, and you can see many of the photos that we've shared from the flight line. Under the guest book tab, you can see photos of our special guests and their journeys in aviation as well. Facebook and Instagram users can find us under the Squawk Ident podcast, or YouTube and Twitter users can find us under the Aviator Tony and Squawk Ident. We encourage you to support us on YouTube with a like, subscribe, and share. There you can see short video clips from the podcast. Just want to say thank you again to you gentlemen, and thank you for taking the time to listen to these grateful aviators. Keep the dirty side down, be safe, and take care of each other. See you later, guys.
All right, Tony, Z.
Take care,
it's been
guys.
Great,
See ya.
Good podcast. We'll see you soon.
All right. Forget about it. See you.
You got it. All right.